And Stan the Fan, I'm proud to present this Zoom video presented by Pressbox and PressBoxOnline.com. Gary Stein is my co-host, and we have an esteemed guest tonight, one of my favorite people. I've known Scott Garceau now, got to be close to 35 years, Scott. Always a wonderful, warm person, and you are a pro's pro, and you really are a dear friend, and welcome on to
That's
the show.
all you need to say. We're good, Stan. I'll talk to you next week.
All right, good. Gary, you want to chime in and say something about
I'm
Scott?
with two pros.
Scott, the human being.
You know, I got to tell you something, Scott. You preceded me here. You got here in 1980.
1980, yep.
So that's 40 years. I got here in 87. And I just want to tell you, I got to echo exactly what Stan just said. The first thing that pops into my mind when I think about Scott Garceau is a pro's pro. Yeah. Whether it be play-by-play, sports talk, TV, whatever, you're there.
You know, and Scott, I mean this. You know, I did sports talk coming from this angle when I started, like a little bit of controversial. As I grew older,
Stan, I listened to those shows.
I know. As I grew older, I got mellowed out, and I wasn't as passionate. Where I've always liked you, and I liked you on the air at WMAR, always solid on the broadcast that you did. But it wasn't really until talk radio that I started to really see the depth of your knowledge. And that's where I grew to really respect your knowledge of the games and the whole sports entity. Could you talk about what that transition was like?
Yeah, it was. And maybe, you know, I think the TV sportscaster role was being diminished in my later years. You no longer were doing 5-minute sportscasts. Some nights you were doing a minute and a half, and we fought that battle, and I guess they're still fighting it. The local guys, the national guys, and then I showed up to do this radio thing that I wasn't quite sure what I was getting into, but I said, hey, you know, let's give this a run. And suddenly, people were stopping me in grocery stores and gas stations and talking about something I said or Jeremy said, and I said, man, I haven't gotten this kind of response in TV in years. So I guess there's a connection, Stan, and you did radio, and Gary, you've done it. There's a connection with people that maybe you don't get in TV. And I'd have people say, I didn't know you were so funny. And I said, I'm not. But, you know, when you got 2 minutes and 4 highlights and 2 sound bites, there's not a lot of time for you in there. Where in a 4-hour radio show, there's a lot of you coming out. So I think people get a chance to know you a little better. And I've always liked the interaction with fans, and in TV you don't get the same kind of interaction that you do in sports talk radio with phone calls, and you know.
Refresh my memory. Was it the program director there whose name escapes me?
Dave Labrosi.
Dave Labrosi, the guy who would never return a phone call if you were trying to talk to him about working there. But seriously, did he give you sort of the authority when you came in? We're going to audition, because I remember Glenn Eunice sat in with you a couple days, and was it sort of your choice who you wanted to co-host with?
Not really. I think they gave me kind of the final, hey, if you don't want to work with this person, I think they would have listened. And I'm pretty open. I can, but remember, it was Anita. Anita was already there. So Anita and I had, I think, close to 2 years. And then it was kind of like, now Anita left. Who's it going to be? And Zeno was around, you know, he did some shows with me. Jeremy did some shows. Glenn was there. And at one point they said, we'd like to give Jeremy a shot. And I was like, let's do it. Because Jeremy had produced our show. He had filled in. I had a pretty good feel for him. He was a funny guy, but he was also a funny guy that knew a ton of sports. And I respected his knowledge of the game, his passion. And we got along great. You know, I don't know if many guys, we're all married, right?
Yep.
Can you say that you worked with somebody, or you were with somebody almost 10 years and you never had an argument? Because I used to joke about Keith Mills and I, 18, 19 years, and I don't think we ever had a disagreement, right? We had each other's back. We got along. We had a lot of the same thoughts. We had passion for the same teams. And it was kind of that way with Jeremy. Jeremy, should we do this today? Sure, let's do it. You know, do we disagree sometimes on the show? Yeah. Because you come from different angles at some point, but it was never contrived. I'll tell you, I'll take this side, you take that side, we'll argue. We never did that, right? We just kind of showed up and did our thing. And I think a lot of people tell me that they liked it.
Mm.
And I enjoyed doing it.
Scott, let me ask you. So you came here in 1980. So you've been here for 40 years. First of all, can you believe that number?
No, that, it seems like 15 or 20, but yeah,
Right.
it is 40.
Yeah, and you probably started when you probably came here when you were 10 years old, because you can't be much more than 50.
I was in my 20s and now I'm in my late 60s. So yeah.
But my question though is, you had worked in a couple of places before Baltimore, right? And that's kind of the life of a TV guy. You kind of move around, after 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, etc. When you moved here in 1980, did you anticipate that Baltimore was going to be your final place?
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
So what happened?
Did you move, Scott, did you move from New Mexico?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So I started at home in northern Michigan where I
Right.
grew up. Started in radio and then 4 years of TV. And in 1976, I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we loved it. It was like sight unseen. My wife and I had been married like a year, and it was like, hey, hello there.
That's my cat.
Yeah, we made this journey out west, and we didn't know a soul. And 4 years, we loved it. It was a great place, but it was kind of like, you guys are sports guys. I felt like, I started playing A-ball in Marquette, Michigan, and then I went to AAA ball in Albuquerque. I missed out on a job in Seattle just before I came here, and it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I was so disappointed at the time. They interviewed me like 3 different times, thought I had the job, and I didn't get it. And then Sherm Egan, who worked for CBS, I knew Sherm, and he said, hey, there's a job open in Baltimore. I want you to send a tape. And I said, Sherm, I just went through that in Seattle. I was feeling sorry for myself.
Yeah.
And he gave me a good kick in the backside. He was like a big brother and said, you get your tape there. So I did, and here we are 40 years later. But no, I thought I could come here. Maybe if I did a good job in 3 or 4 years here, then I might be in Philadelphia,
Atlanta,
Washington, or New York or Detroit or something. I was thinking about moving up to a bigger market, and then I got here, and Channel 2 was the Oriole and the Colts station at the time.
Yeah.
And I got involved in some of that work. I did Colt preseason football, and then eventually I did my first Oriole game with Brooks, I think in the strike year in '82.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, this is a pretty special place. And think about the passion back then, coming off the '79 World Series. I got here in '80. My passion was for the Colts as a Packers opponent. I'd grown up a Packers fan.
Right.
Great Colt teams. And then I got here and there were like 36,000 people at a game in Memorial Stadium. I'm going, what's going on? And then I started getting the Irsay stories, right?
Yeah.
But no, when I got here, I mean, it has been fantastic for me and my family. We're on our 3rd generation here now. My wife's got a real estate business. We will die.
Let's plug them. Garceau Realty.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You want to give a phone number out?
If you're buying a house, no, just call me. I'll hook you up.
Sounds good.
Gary, go ahead.
Oh, okay, still me.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, still you.
So 40 years later, right? 2020. You've pretty much. you're the dean as far as I'm concerned.
Gary, let me stop you. Let me stop you right there for just a real quick story. I get here in 1980. It's September. I go out to the ballpark with Ted Patterson, who I was working with at Channel 2.
Right.
And by then, you're kind of sizing up the market. And I heard about this guy, Vince Bagley. He's the guy, right? Vince is the guy. And I'm watching him. And I go, yeah, he's okay. So my first night at Memorial Stadium, here he comes. He comes walking, and I see him coming, right? And he comes up to me and he says, welcome to Baltimore. I'm Vince Bagley. And I said, I know who you are, Vince. I said, I've heard a lot of good things about you. And he said, kid, if there's anything I can ever do for you, I'm here for you. And from that day forward, he never let me down. And he's an idol of mine. And he taught me that you can be a friend with all the guys you work with. They might be competitors. You might be competing a little bit, but you don't have to be cutting the legs out from under them. And what a mentor Vince was for all of us who came up in this business. Go ahead, Gary. I just wanted to get that in there.
That's one thing that we share. There's no doubt about it. He is great. But when I say that you're the dean, I not only mean as far as the amount of years that you've been here for, but also the different roles that you filled. And we talked about them before. You've been on the radio. You've done play-by-play, football, baseball. I think you've done lacrosse, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course, the Thanksgiving Day turkey ball.
Yeah, turkey ball.
And
he's worked with Tom Matty and survived.
and which is amazing in and of itself. But my question is, when you think of Scott Garceau, do you think of yourself as a play-by-play guy first, as a sports talker first? How do you see yourself?
Or a good fantasy player?
Some of the above. How's that? No, I've always told people, they say, well, what do you like doing? I always hate when they say, which sport do you like the best? And I say, man, I said, a Sunday afternoon game with the Ravens from 1 to 4 is about as good as it gets, or a major college basketball game. I love that. But baseball's there for you every day. That's my girlfriend, right? She's there for you every day for 6 months, not this year, but in a normal year and spring training. And I love the game. I love the fact it's too long, it's too boring. I love the fact that it's a grind. It's 162, and usually the cream comes to the top. But back to about what I like best, I always tell them, I think I got into radio first and then TV a year later. So it was a short dip of radio. I got into it not because I loved radio or TV, because I love sports. There are two things I wanted to do growing up. Number one, I wanted to be that pro player that we all look up to. And I got to be about 12 or 13 and realized that ain't going to happen, right? I'm not good enough for that. Coach Phillips helped me. His scouting report on me was he's not very big, but he's slow, right? So so I thought about coaching or broadcasting. When I graduated from high school, they did this little thing called the giftatory. So you got a gift like where your career was headed. And I got a hunting license. It said to Scott Garceau, a big game license. So this sportscaster can always call the big games or something.
Good.
But the difference to me, and I love TV nightly sports, and I enjoyed it. And there's part of me, I like the reporting part when you're digging for a story. I like that part. But when 11 o'clock came and I rolled the Oriole highlights or the Blast highlights or the Raven highlights, I knew how they were coming out, right? But when you're calling a game, if I'm calling an Oriole game later this month, and I hope I am, every day you show up at the ballpark, you don't know what's going to happen, right? So there's something about doing live. And Gary, you've done play-by-play. Stan, you've been around sports your whole life. We go to the ballpark or we go to the stadium to see the Ravens play. And on any given Sunday or on any given game, who knows what's going to happen. And I love that live element.
I agree.
I want to get back into your decision to leave talk radio and go into doing baseball again. But I got to talk to you about probably the most poignant experience you had in your, 10 years doing the radio here?
Was it 10 years, right.
10 years has got to be the relationship that you and Jeremy developed and helped foster what became known as the Mo Gaba experience in Baltimore. I just think the kid is absolutely off the charts, one of the greatest persons I've ever met. And what I remember most, Scott, is a couple times I'd hear him on your show, I'd sort of like make fun of him in my head, like, God, he's picking the Wizards to win by 60 points tonight. But I never knew that he was sick. I never knew that he was blind. It was, so tell us a little bit about how you experienced discovering him and how you guys developed that rapport.
There's one more thing. You never knew he was sick. You never knew he was blind, and you never knew he was black. I've had a lot of people. I didn't know Mo was black. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
If you know Mo, the sick, the blind, skin color, none of that matters because the kid's got a heart of gold.
Yeah.
And he's been up against it since basically he was born, right? He was about 1 when something hit his optic nerve.
Yeah.
Diagnosed with cancer then, and he lost his sight. He's legally blind. He can see little images, basically, but he is so sharp, and he's been up against it his whole life, and all he does is uplift you. When he got some recent bad news on his report, you know what his reaction was to his mom? Oh, I don't want to let the people down. So many people are pulling. He wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking, I don't want to let anybody down because I'm sick. So that's Mo. And I, you know what? In a perfect radio world, there would be a program director somewhere saying, "Yeah, don't take the call from that kid." That's people don't want to hear that. No. In Baltimore, we wanted to hear Mo, and we put him on every time he called, and every time he hung up, you felt good. You felt better about yourself. You're having a little bit of a bad day, or you're complaining about something that's pretty minor in your life. Mo was there to say, "Hey, look up. Things could be a lot worse."
In what was one of the craziest juxtapositions. I think it's unbelievable how Trey Mancini, who in the cover story we did about Mo,
Yes.
when we named him the Sports Person of the Year, Trey Mancini credited him spending some time with him at the All-Star break of 2018 with how he turned the season around. And look, a year and a half after that, it's Trey Mancini who gets some bad news, and he kind of turns to Mo for some guidance. It's kind of like the boy playing father to the man.
Incredible. And saw Trey at Mo's house when they had the parade for him last week. That relationship. Think about this. You guys know that the Major League ball player in a 162 game season has very few days off.
Yeah.
They don't have, and some of those are travel days. Trey, 2 years ago, All-Star break. What's he got? A three-day break, right? Where you going to hit South Beach or go some? He calls Mo and his mom and says, I want to take you guys out for the day. And they go to Dave and Buster's and they play games and they have lunch. And that says so much about Trey, and that relationship is so special. And you're the irony now that Trey is battling cancer and Mo's there to support Trey and Trey's there to support Mo.
Just one more thing about Mo before Gary asks you a couple. The other day, that guy that's on CBS Radio on the national side of CBS, Damon Amandolero,
Yes.
the DA.
Yeah.
So the other day, about a week or 10 days ago, he's doing a commentary, and it's on Mo, my hero, Mo Gaba, and he's talking about how this kid used to call him. And then I find out from Jeremy that Damon, on an off day, he and his wife drove from New York, their first off day since the pandemic started, drove to spend the afternoon with Mo. And I mean, it just blew me away. But that's the kind of kid he is.
Who was the woman that does overnight sports too? Amy Lawrence, right?
Yeah,
Amy Lawrence.
yeah.
Mo used to call her all the time. We'd have a caller call in and said, "I'm a truck driver. I'm driving at 4:00 this morning, and damn Mo's on with Amy Lawrence." And I go, "Mo, are you two-timing us?" And I think maybe because the blind thing, his sleep cycles are a little different.
Yeah.
And he's up, and Amy and him had a thing going too. So Mo's touched a lot of people.
But, you know, Scott, it's interesting that we talk about those stories about Mo and how many different people he called or he touched their lives. You know, when you're doing radio and there's no, and you can't, and it's two-way in terms of conversation, but it's not two-way in terms of seeing people. You never know who you're going to influence and how much better you have the opportunity to make that person's life is, and vice versa. How much of an opportunity that person has to make your life better. That's the beauty of radio, that connection that you can have with your audience like that.
Within the last year, our producer Alex read me a note that was sent, I guess, I think it was on our fan page or something, but it was about a guy who had suffered depression and really had a tough go of it, and said that listening to our show gave him life again and gave him hope, and he laughed. And I said, my God, Jeremy, I said, we come in here and do this thing that who knows who's listening to it. It's not going to win any Academy Awards. We just come in and we talk some sports and have fun. But you hear something like that, how it's changing a person's life. I have another friend that's an attorney that suffered through some depression and alcoholism and turned the corner. And he said one of the things that turned him around was talk radio. He said, I got a connection, and it pulled me out of a real dark place. So, my gosh, you don't think you're doing things like that. You're just opening a mic and talking about the birds and having a good time. But some people get connected, and that's a great thing if we can have a positive influence.
So if you got that connection and talk about how much you love doing it, why make the change suddenly to go back to baseball broadcasting?
You know, I think I was getting to the point that I'm not saying that I couldn't be doing talk radio in 3 or 4 years, but, you know, it was getting maybe to the point where I was going to slow it down a little bit possibly, or maybe they were going to slow me down a little bit possibly. And the Orioles reached out to me. And the irony of this was when Ernie Accorsi worked for the Orioles, there was one year when he was between the Browns and the Giants that Peter Angelos brought him in. Ernie said, I was beholden to Peter for that because I was kind of out in the cold for a little bit. And Ernie said, or Peter said to Ernie, come on in, you can help us. You can help us. And I got a call from Ernie one day and he said, Peter would like you to come and work for the Orioles. I was at Channel 2 at the time. And I thought about it and I said, you know what, Ernie, I think I just signed a contract. I was involved in a lot of things and I was pretty happy where I was. And I said, I'm not sure this is the time, but I'm really flattered and tell Peter that I really appreciate him. And it wasn't define the role. I think they were looking for a PR director and maybe some PR, some broadcasting. And so I turned it down. I really appreciated them thinking about me. And this time when they reached out, went and had lunch. And I said, you know what? I told John Angelos later, I said, when your dad called back in the 90s, it wasn't the right time, but I said, I think this is the perfect time. In the beginning, I thought I could probably still do the talk radio with games sprinkled in.
Yeah.
So we talked about concept and they said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, what I've done in the past, I said, I'm not allergic to doing radio, but I did TV. And I said that I'd be comfortable with that. And so then they came back and I thought they might say 20 to 30 games and they talked 90 to 100 games. And at that point, I realized I couldn't do both. Yeah. And the people at the Fan were great. They were great. And they said, we still want you around. You know, you can do some Ravens coverage. We want to hear from you during baseball season, but, you know, not the daily shows. So here I am, semi-retired right now.
What have you actually been doing, Scott, for the last 3 months?
The first month was dark because my wife was going to work. Real estate was essential. And, you know, they had deals and she had agents she had to take care of. So she was going to work and I was home. And thank God for my 2 to 3 mile walks each day to get out and get fresh air and change the scenery. If not, I didn't go to a gas station, a grocery store, anywhere. I was pretty much holed up. And at that point, you didn't know when the end was. We still don't.
Yeah.
But we have a little more clarity now. Back then, it was dark that first month. And then Pennsylvania opened up for golf. And we would get 8 guys and cross the Susquehanna, 45-minute drive and go up and play golf. And I started to breathe again, you know, just seeing some friends, getting out in the fresh air, hitting bad golf shots. It kind of felt normal again. And I think we scheduled like a 3rd round in Pennsylvania, and that was the weekend Maryland opened up and started. So I played a ton of golf. I played today, not getting better, but I keep playing, and it's good therapy in this time. I did those projects around the house like the first month too, and I think I ran out. In like week 3, I was done. It was like I'm done. I've cleaned all the drawers and thrown out the old press guides and all those things.
You know, Scott, even though you've been doing play-by-play, whether it be for football or baseball or whatever sport, you know, over periods of time for the last 40 years, the environment that you're going to be doing play-by-play in this year is completely different. Obviously, you know, you have an opportunity in the past to be at all the games and, you know, see everything. But if you're going to be in a studio broadcasting some games like Mel Allen, I guess, used to do.
Yeah, right. Recreations almost.
Yeah,
right.
your vision is limited. And I wonder if you think that's going to affect your play-by-play style at all.
Yeah, well, first I'm getting back on the horse after a while, so there was that, and I got in 3 spring games, so that was kind of neat. I did that Oriole Yankee game on a Monday, flew home Tuesday, played a round of golf Wednesday morning, and I think Wednesday night the NBA shut down, and then dominoes just fell, and by the weekend we were all getting shut down. It will be a lot tougher. The only advantage I see is when you look down on the monitor when you're doing a game live, to see where that pitch location is or maybe what the pitch is. I don't have to worry about a foul ball coming back and hitting me between the eyeballs. The Orioles are playing in Boston and I'm broadcasting in Baltimore, right?
Right.
But no, it's going to be a challenge. Somebody asked me, have you ever done a game like that? And I said, no. ESPN's doing some of that now where they're college football, college lacrosse, where they're not sending announcers on site. They're doing it remotely. I think it's a challenge. I'll lean on Mr. Palmer or Brian Roberts or whoever's sitting next to me in the booth, right? Because 4 eyes are better than 2. But I'm looking forward to it. I think we all want to see baseball, whatever. We know we're looking at a 2-month season. And if we have to jump through some different hoops and approach things differently, so be it with what we're all going through in 2020.
Scott, what's your gut tell you about football? baseball is a game that, at least I don't think there's going to be much chance of passing the virus playing the game. But football is a different animal.
It is. You're right on top of each other, and you're piling up a fumble, and you got 12 guys digging in a pile. Yeah, they have. They talked about some new face masks that they're going to put on to try to protect the players more. I'm sure they'll do everything possible, but there's no guarantees. And I think we've all found out one thing since this started. We don't know, right? We don't know. We think we know. The experts think they know, and they're wrong quite a bit because we're in uncharted waters. But yeah, football does present. Well, I saw the thing, what they want to keep the first 8 rows empty in all stadiums, even if they have fans. I guess that's so somebody can't breathe on the players.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be different.
Hey, we've run about a half an hour. I just have to ask you in closing.
Man, that was quick.
The press box that comes out on July the 8th is going to have Cal Ripken on the cover and entitled Cal's Big Night. And Bill Ordine, who wrote the cover story, got to talk to Cal, Chris Berman, and Buck Martinez, who was the color analyst on TV.
Yeah.
Hard to believe that is 25 years.
It's crazy. It's crazy how the time goes by, right? You're talking about me being here in 40 years, and that's 25 years ago. That seemed like it's 12 or 13, right?
What are your remembrances of that? Is that one of the biggest nights in your sportscasting career, being at that game?
It is. I think historically, if we were there or followed that thing, I watched what's the MLB special, the 60 Minute. They have a lot of Harold Reynolds and Billy Ripken on. I saw that recently during the pandemic, and it kind of brought back a lot. What I remember about it a little bit is I wasn't Cal, but I kind of felt like Cal when he finally hit the finish line, because we'd been following that thing and specials and working. It's almost like opening day. When opening day is over, you kind of go, okay, now we can go back and watch some baseball the next night. Remember those Tuesday nights at Memorial Stadium with like 11,000? You could hear the center fielder sneeze. It'd be 38 degrees. That was like, okay, now we're back to regular baseball. There was just so much going on covering that story, such a big national story. And of course, all the TV and radio stations were trying to, get in, and it was business opportunities, I guess, with special programming. So we were running hard on that thing. But the one thing that I'll always remember is that salute from Cal Sr. His first time back. Remember, he hadn't been back to Camden Yards since they let him go. But that connection between Cal and Senior, when he looked up in the booth and Senior almost gave him a salute. Mm-hmm. And man, if that didn't move you, nothing did.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, Scott, if I could just get one more in, just real quick, if you're talking about memories and seasons and players, you were the first play-by-play voice for the Ravens on the radio when they came here in 1996. First 3 seasons under Ted Marchibroda, not a great record, obviously, but Ted was well-loved. But when Brian Billick came in 1999, things started to change. But even though things started to change in 99, I don't think anybody could really have expected a Super Bowl season in the year 2000. You were there for each and every play at each and every game, home and away. As that season went on, and all the different things that happened, the no scoring a touchdown for 23 quarters, and the quarterback change, and the historic defense, and all the things that happened, what are a couple of takeaways or big remembrances that you may have from that season?
One of the things I remember is, and I don't remember the bar, but the guy down on Harford Road had a bar, and he was on the roof. He wasn't coming down until he scored a touchdown.
The goof on the roof?
Yeah, he went about 3 weeks.
Down until he scored. Yeah.
They were like 3 weeks in, so he was up there like 2 weeks. And I mean, we're not talking July and August then. It was cold up there. And then it was Dilfer to Stokely in Cincinnati, right? And that was the start of an 11-game win streak. So they finally scored a touchdown. They won that game. I went back that week. I told Kevin Byrne about the guy, and I said, I'd like to go back. And he said, let's get Trent and Brandon to sign a ball for him. And they signed him. Glad we got you off the roof or something. And Trent Dilfer. And I went back to Harford Road. We gave him the ball and did a little story with Channel 2 on him. But one of the things I remember was that suffocating defense that will be one of the greatest of all time. And as that thing picked up momentum, I mean, the defense knew they were good pretty early. But it gained momentum by the time they got into the playoffs. The Tennessee game was the big one. I think everybody felt that was the Super Bowl. The winner of
Absolutely.
that Ravens game at Tennessee was going to be the favorite to win the Super Bowl, even though the Giants just smoked the Vikings. They hammered them in the
Shut
NFC.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody in that Raven organization, once they won in Tennessee, felt real confident. And when they went to Tampa for the Super Bowl, it was like, when do we get the trophy? I mean, if you want to talk about cocky, they were cocky because they knew how good that defense was, and they weren't going to lose, and that's what happened. And the other thing about that team was all the personalities, right? Shannon Sharp, Goose, Trent
Siragusa, yeah.
Trent Dilfer was a great story. I mean, you had Ray Lewis go up and down. If there ever was a Hard Knocks team to do with all the person, and Billick, who would fill a notepad, how about him showing up in Tampa and telling all the reporters they weren't fit to cover the Ray Lewis story, right? Basically putting all the heat on him instead of Ray. It was a stroke of genius. Brian was a pretty smart guy, but he walked up first press conference.
He was a great PR guy. There was no question.
Aren't qualified. Ambulance chasers, right? It was a great year. I'll never forget it.
I'll just never forget that. I think it was the first third down in the game where they handed to Tiki Barber and he went left and Ray Lewis came all the way around and caught him. You knew the game was over at that.
I think there was an NFL Films cut to either Marvin Lewis or Brian Billick at that point and said they don't know what they're in for. Meaning
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
In this defense. Yeah.
Scott Garceau, many thanks. Great friend. Look forward to playing some fantasy baseball. I'll end both of my shows tonight with my fingers crossed.
I'm going to salute you, Scott.
Always
Gary,
a pleasure.
Good to see you, buddy.
All
Be
right.
well. See you soon.
Talk
Okay,
soon.
Stan.